bought them last night. Board back in 18, resolution 18-24 on December 4th, placed $100,000 of perpetual care fund, $345,000 of the water fund, and $245,000 of the sewer fund in the 2-year bond. The $100,000 perpetual was 3% interest. 245 water was 3.10% interest. 100,000 of water was 3.05% interest. And then the sewer fund, 245,000 is 3% interest. That will mature very shortly. So that's going to be brought to the board here probably the second week in November to make a decision on what you want to do with that money.
God, it doesn't feel like it was that long.
I know. It's a quick 2 years.
On that perpetual care, did you find out?
I'm waiting.
You should be
After I emailed, Adrian and I talked, I emailed Kendra, and she has basically one of her law assistants named Allie working on it. So she contacted me. I dug up the ordinance number 61 from 1933 that established perpetual care. We actually had documents on it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
1933.
47, but yeah. Even earlier.
Yeah, I didn't recognize the mayor's name, but if I looked up there, I could probably figure it out. So
It's a statute, from what I understand, it's statutory, but doesn't mean there aren't ways to get
ways to get around it, maybe. So she wanted all our information. She wanted copies of our financials. She wanted copies of all the ordinance and the code. So she has all that. So I'm guessing by tomorrow, if not Friday, I'll get a response back.
What do you think we should do with it?
I don't think, I was researching today, and I think Adrian was too, online about perpetual care funds, and it just doesn't generate enough interest unless you are able to take your principal balance and roll it into high interest yields for investments, and that's what the purpose is. And then use that interest to offset your cost, and it just doesn't work that way for us. If we had a few $1 million, yeah. But $130,000? No. So since David and I met today with Brad Curtis of Northern Engineering and Steve Lund, the surveyor, to plat the east side, that's what they're working on next.
Yeah.
That $133,000 could definitely go towards building the new east side of the cemetery in the next few years. That's my proposal. But you right back in the cemetery.
It seems like perpetual care.
Yeah.
Itself, right?
Yep. So.
I like the way you did it. It just sucks to eliminate, to get rid of something with such a storied history.
Sorry, dear.
You gotta think long and hard about it all.
Right.
Yeah, just in passing, you mentioned reinvesting these funds.
Yeah.
Was it Peak? Is that the name of that?
Peak Investment Management, yeah.
My suggestion to get in touch with those folks, because a lot of times there are opportunities that aren't generally well known.
Yeah.
And the case in point being the ones that we bought into. No, they're not secret by any means, but they're not the names that come to mind usually.
So between now and then I'll get a whole, what's the name of Troy Hunsucker? Peaks Investment Management.
You know, I'm sure that they understand the investment objective and the constraints of state law and so on and so forth. But I'm sure they could find you some instrument that is at least competitive in today's market.
Well, you probably agree, Larry, that things are kind of unstable now until after the election in November, and then that'll probably decide which way the market may go. I may be wrong.
There's that, plus it's been an ongoing policy of the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low.
Yeah.
And how that's going to play out is anybody's guess, but you're not going to get 3.15 like we got.
Yeah.
But you may well be able to do something better than color of trust.
Because now it's pretty low according to what David saw. I think I saw it was like 2.10. It's pretty low.
Yeah. And there are instruments that are issued that again follow the criteria of the state law of what we can and can't invest in, that I would guess are in the neighborhood of 1.5, somewhere in that neighborhood.
They would definitely know, so I'll reach out for them.
You know, they would know best. They look at this stuff all day long.
They invest government funds, so they
Sure.
know all the rules and regulations.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily have to hold it to maturity either.
Yeah.
You know, it could be something that you just draw interest on from now until whenever you decide to use the funds.
Well, I definitely want to bring that up tonight, just advance notice that we'll be discussing that next month, and then I reviewed the water sewer and the fee schedules, and just to confirm, back in January 15th, 2019, that's when the board authorized 53% increase for sewer, 1% water. And then later December that year, almost a year later, but December 2019, going into this year, it was 1% sewer, 2% water on the resolution 39. And then September 15th, just recently, the board implemented a fourth tier to water fund at $8 per 1,000 gallons for over quota use, but the rates didn't change other than that. So, and I was talking to Mary today, and what happened is mid-year, people saw the rates increase. And what that was, is in the wintertime, for the 3-month average for your sewer usage, they calculate the usage of water, which is your lowest in the middle of winter, and then they set that fee for the year for your water sewer usage. And that wasn't done as we should have, so we had to basically, essentially, long story short, readjust it. And that went into effect in July or June instead of the first of the year. And that's really basically
That makes a lot more sense.
makes a lot more sense. So it wasn't a rate increase, it was the new adjustment for usage wasn't done, and it was done late. So that's what that was, when you saw an increase in your bill. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, so we'll put it on the screen, but tonight we're going to focus on capital projects. Wages and benefits have been pushed to next Tuesday during the regular board meeting. Next Tuesday's board meeting involves audit RFPs. I'm going to ask the board to let me solicit engineering proposals, similar to audit, obviously. The October financials will be on the as for action discussion. And the fourth one is appointment of the planning commission vacancy, if that's still scheduled.
Yeah, did you want to do that?
Next Tuesday?
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have applicants?
None.
Okay, somebody just asked on Nextdoor, and I said we were gonna wait until the first meeting of November.
We can wait. We
Okay.
can wait. There's no urgency.
Okay, if that works.
Yep. Okay. So only those three, the two RFPs, and then the financials. All we have for action items. So we're gonna add this to the end for wages and benefits next Tuesday.
Okay.
It's
The first meeting of November is the hearing about wastewater at the community center. You want to do it there, or you want to wait till the second meeting?
second meeting would be the 17th.
We're gonna be doing the bids for the wastewater, but that would be fine.
Yeah, because November 3rd, the first meeting's election night. We normally cancel that meeting, but because of JVA and the wastewater requirements, we have to have a public meeting, so we're gonna have it over at the senior center November 3rd.
Okay.
So we could do it then, because it's technically a regular meeting.
Right.
So whatever you want us to do is fine.
On November 3rd.
It'd be a quick appointment,
Yeah.
and then we can go right to the public hearing for the wastewater plant.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's do
Yeah.
that. It gives me a couple more
Okay.
weeks to try and find somebody.
Yeah, let's do that, Mary, and then
Who had one? I was
Appoint-
watching, but
Appointment for the.
November
I
3rd.
don't know, November 3rd, not the 17th, okay.
Because right now I'm looking at having another planning commission meeting on the 17th. Because we have the zoning to talk about yet, remember?
Yeah.
So that way we'll have a full planning. No, it's the ag holding and residential estate tweaks that was not worked on. So a few transitions, so again, tonight will be capital projects. You have you have a summary sheet of the general fund. which I put out because at the bottom it'll show where our fund balance is after revenues and expenditures, and we have a pretty good, what I call cash reserve. You had the most recent copy as of an hour ago of the budget in totality. And then I have I really don't do Excel spreadsheets, I should learn how to, but basically capital improvement projects 21, 20, it says 24, it's actually 22. That I want to start with tonight. So if we're looking at the bigger spreadsheet up there up on the screen, and I'm not going to beat around the bush, I'm just going to go right into it. Dave and I had a pre-conference today because mostly affects him. So what I did is last year, if you recall, we did a capital plan of a 3-year plan, 20, 21, 22. So 20 words we're about to end, so I combined 21, 22 in this spreadsheet. In yellow highlight is what's currently in this document budget. It's already built in, which I'll show you. What's in red is my wish list. Only if you're willing to dip in a little bit into the reserve funds that aren't being used. I'll explain that here in a little bit. And then I show projects for 2022. This is my proposal only. By all means, change it if you want to. The Reynolds Avenue Phase 2, that's a 2-year project. That, I'll show you next, will pretty much take up the entire capital improvement fund in the budget. That's a big project. That estimate is from Steve Bethers as a week ago.
Every year we get the capital improvement list that we, does it kind of correlate to what we've done previous? Like back in 2018 we were planning this, and then 2019 this. So are we making progress through our capital improvements list as we go by year?
Yeah, we're checking them off the list for sure.
Okay, so just like last year we were for 2020 was the Reynolds Avenue. So that was one of the top priorities. So we're kind of actually working and checking off the list as we go.
Yep. And I didn't pull that up tonight, but that'll come out in the budget of what we budgeted for, what we accomplished, and then what we budgeted for 2021. So it's an evolving document.
It's right here in our budget.
And we definitely want to show the public that we're getting projects done. Absolutely, that's a good point.
We have it in our budget books too. This is 2020's budget book.
In the capital improvement plan at the back end of the explanation, it's all the years we've had the capital improvement fund since basically 2009. And that lists annually whatever projects are by category. And that's the last document that I update once a budget is established.
Policy, and then the next pages have the plan, what we use all the funds for. Yeah.
So.
Previous year's projects, current year's projects.
Yeah, I just was, because we have all this stuff, are we actually checking off the list so we're not keep on adding to the list every year, moving down the list?
Yeah, we're not CDOT. We don't just keep adding projects with no money. We actually get things
right,
done.
definitely.
Yeah, the CDOT, that drives.
Well, it's good, because that's what I think is important that the community can see that we're actually making progress on things.
That's why I don't just put the current fiscal year's capital projects in that list. I give the last 10 previous years, so they can go look back and see what we accomplished, what we moved to the following year, what we did, and what we spent. So I think that's important for transparency that we do that.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is summarize and go through this one-page spreadsheet and then open it up for discussion. I'd like to propose in streets, chip seal, Bella Vista, both sides of Main Street. That was budgeted for this year. We held off because of COVID. We don't know how the budget would affect our fund balance. Actually, we're not sitting too bad. But with the detention pond project being such a high estimate of $500,000, we decided, plus we're late in the year, decided not to pull in the chip seal people, we just did patching. So all these projects, this is my #1 priority because I want to keep with our street program as far as improving our streets. So this would be all of Bella Vista, and basically from Vasquez to Division, from 66, both sides of Main Street, not Main Street, to Reynolds Avenue. And that's what we did years ago, but we would keep that cycle going. And then a wish list of mine is I've been wanting for years to repave Grand Avenue. We rebuilt Sturkle years ago. In 2 years, I want to talk about Front Street and 32 going up by the cemetery. But with the 7-Eleven going in, and we are doing Reynolds Avenue, that's going to be a different fund, that's capital improvement fund. This would be reserves in our general fund, is what I'm looking at.
Is that putting a curb and sidewalk on the north side of Grand as well?
Well, let me scroll down. 250,000, it was like 248,000 that David got from Martin Marietta to repave from 85 to the curb at Sturgill. The full width, a full repaving. And then the $100,000 is for the new sidewalk, which I think should go with it.
Yeah.
From Town Hall to River, and then on to the front of $8,000 storage where that crosswalk is, and make it a crosswalk instead it's all dirt because there's no shoulder.
Right.
But the curb and gutter would be essentially from Olive Lane to River, because there's nothing there. And that's where the curb and gutter would go with that sidewalk. If that makes sense. Because that's really the only
Yeah, I
area
think
that
that
doesn't
would-
have curb and gutter.
That would clean it up and give people a sidewalk instead of being on traffic and on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think and it would tie into the sidewalk that dead ends at River. And Division, there's going to be a new sidewalk, because that's another sidewalk project I had outlined in yellow that we were budgeting for next year, because that's 100% funded by CDOT. And I'm working with them to get our contract for the board to sign. We have a grant. So I'm looking at a big scale project. All the rentals, which includes a sidewalk, then a new sidewalk from down Division from Reynolds to Goodrich, so that would connect north to south.
Right.
And then you have a sidewalk on Grand Avenue too, to basically connect all those sub-connections, so to speak.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I'm looking at as a big project for next year.
Yeah.
And then, sorry,
We haven't talked about the Grand Avenue very much.
Grand Avenue?
We haven't talked, the Grand Avenue portion is pretty fresh as far as an idea.
I know we talked about it before. That
We talked about it, but with the Division sidewalk going in, Reynolds going in, Grand is I just feel it's time to rebuild Grand Avenue.
It's one of our main streets.
It's our main street. When I take off for work in school session, it is packed. I mean, and it doesn't have a sidewalk.
I would disagree. I was expecting you to be looking for money for the Main Street,
I'll
to get a
explain-
design on that.
I'll explain that next. Because we met, when David and I met at the cemetery with Brad Curtis, he's the one doing the design of the Main Street as well. So I'll get to that next. And then in 2022, there's your Main Street in Marion. So now, and then we need to keep building sidewalks and all that. So going back to this conversation, the last 12 months, Brad Curtis has been working with these engineering students from CU Denver. Unlike the streetscape, they actually are engineers that are doing the physical engineering to figure out the sidewalk to make them ADA compliant, especially on the east side. None of those are compliant because there's steps up to the buildings, like the chiropractor, K&O, and Shirley Davis. And then figure out that storm drainage. And right now, because it's still a CDOT right-of-way, he contacted CDOT, researched it. He said the process, the permitting is pretty extensive to do any improvements in that area. So what I'm thinking of doing is doing Grand this next year, because it's going to take probably another year to get the devolution done. According to Heather Paddock, they finally gave Fort Lupton their money last month for their devolution of Denver Avenue, finally.
Wow.
So now we're number one on the list for the next devolution reason for it. So I'm not guaranteeing anything, but their next budget is July 1 of 2021. So that's kind of why I want to put it off, not procrastinate. But I don't want to really do anything until it's our road. I mean, we can patch it, but to me that's just throwing money away.
Wasn't there some sidewalk work that you thought we couldn't wait on? Maybe we should wait another year now?
We could do Marion. Like from the.
I'm not even saying, I'm just taking your word here. You walk that street like Dave and I did from the chiropractor and K&O, it's terrible. It's terrible. So we could patch that up. It really needs to be patched up, but then we're gonna rip it all back out because that's not how it's gonna be designed. So it's a quandary. I'm not sure what to do there. And I know Jill and Brenda at K&O, they both talked to me about it, but
Well, and I just had Jesse Trout, who owns
Yep.
McCormick right there on the corner, and he hit me up the other day about it as well. And I haven't gotten pricing yet to look at whether we could just go in and do a skim coat and at least kind of go over the trip hazards and smooth them out for the time being. Unfortunately, in this litigious society, it might be cheaper for us to go in and replace the sidewalks as they are and then rip it all out and do it again than to end up with somebody getting hurt. None of us want that to happen. So we've got to kind of weigh that balance. But as far as actually doing any of the improvements, we don't want to do that, but it would just be trying to smooth out some of those. And I mean, there are some companies that come in and grade them and grind them and cut them and make it where they're smoother. But so much of that is, it looks like a jigsaw puzzle in some of it, you know.
I think you have to put some on top of it, like you said, right?
And I don't know whether we can, if we'll gain enough by doing that it would be worth.
Well, unlike
versus
asphalt,
just
you
tearing it
pour
out.
concrete too thin, it'll just crack.
Oh, exactly, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
That's basically what we're doing to 32.5 this week or next week, or 32 and Front Street. We're just patching it to get by the next 2 years until we can actually rebuild the road. I don't disagree. I did state that, but I hate wasting the money pouring our roof back out.
But we may have to do some,
Yeah.
find at least the worst areas and go ahead and patch those back. So I was actually walking that earlier today.
So that you think there's sections that we can do?
The kicker down there is there's so much of it that's bad that it's like, how do you stop? I mean, and it's kind of like when we do the street patching in certain spots. You've got alligatoring, and I've got to just say, okay, this is where we're stopping. I know there's still alligatoring going for the next 3 feet that direction, but we've already gone 30. I can't afford to go 40, you know, kind of thing.
The worst area is right in front of K&L and the chiropractor. That's the very worst. It is bad down by McCormick Team there, but that's the very worst section of it. So even if we have to saw cut it and put it, you know, a 4-inch patch in there that gets by, I mean, that's less thing with it. But it's on the list. I mean, I was just pushing it back one more year because of CDOT issues. And
I think it sounds promising.
we're getting there. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Excel tonight because they're beyond anything back.
Oh, no.
They came and did a walkthrough. Sturgeon Electric came and did a walkthrough last month. I thought they were about ready to go, and then we heard nothing for a month. So that's sidewalks, parks. I updated this number to 175 based upon what you sent me, Spencer. That's a board decision. We can dip into reserve funds and replace Lincoln Park this next year if we want to. A much smaller project I've talked about for years is getting something, not necessarily a playground, but some kind of play features at the community center, because those kids just destroy everything when they got ball. They don't destroy everything, but they're all over the place.
Yeah.
When there's ball
Gives me
season.
something to do when they're not playing and watching everyone else play a game if they're not playing.
Well, the little guys, the little ones, whether we have a community center rental or Zumba class or whatever, or there's ball, I mean, the kids don't have anything to do. So I thought behind the community center, putting in some kind of, not a playground, but some kind of features that they can be entertained by. So that was my proposal. But yet, Lincoln Park and Coronado Park, that's been on the list for a long time. We just haven't done anything with it. And then I put on here the South Platte River Open Space and Trail. I don't know what the numbers will be, but that should be dedicated by the end of this year. That's 8 acres by quick thing be.
If I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah, on the, I just happened to, Troy had showed me the proposal that you sent over earlier today for the Lincoln Park Playground. Speaking with Sursa and with some of the playground chip people, the engineered wood chips, I noticed that they had almost 20,000 in there between new chips and the removal of the old chips and all that. I understand we'll have to remove or at least pull some of the old chips back to place the new equipment, and it would be an ideal world to go in and pull out all the old chips and put in brand new ones. But according to Sursa, the old ones deteriorate and they just, they rot away, but they remain a safety zone because the rotting wood still gives you that fall impact, which is what they're supposed to do. So us just adding a few fresh ones and not necessarily pulling everything out of there and putting all brand new ones in there might be one way to save some funds on that proposal. And that was just at a very short glance. It was just something that I noticed that jumped out at me. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, I don't know, to put in the new equipment, how much of the old we need to take out, and then we're going to find out we just removed a bunch of rotted wood, and so then we do need to put the, and maybe that's what their experience is saying, we really need to do that. So I'm not sure. I just know that Sursa has said we're safe to continue to just put the new engineered chips over the top of the old every third year when we've been doing it, just because the rotting wood actually still allows that soft safety zone for the fall protection. So just a thought that crossed my mind, but I don't know how much would have to be removed to put in there. I saw $20,000. I'm like, I usually can do all 4 parts for that. You know, as far as adding some new chips in each place. So it was just a thought, but.
The biggest wish list is, and this is more of a reserve fund issue, is the public facilities. I've talked to the board a long time. We're out of room. We're putting stuff out in the dirt for equipment outside our public works yard. So David, the last 2 years, has picked up estimates from me for adding 2 bays onto the shop on the north side. Now that the fire department's built, it's something we can pursue. It's about $100,000 a bay. And this cost does include concrete for flooring.
It does or it doesn't?
It does. Add 2 bays.
There's room on the north side to add 2 bays?
For 2 bays.
Before that?
Well, I can agree with you. What I'm thinking of is adding 2 bays and maybe in a smaller addition for storage, because I have so many extra tables and chairs in this building that I just need a place to cold store when we don't need it. Because right now, like we're using this room, we usually shove everything in that room, but now they're in there, so we have to put chairs back out here.
Who's in there?
It's the Veterans Memorial Committee.
Oh, okay. I was like, what's that noise?
And until we build a new PD, which is going to take some time, this is practical. And we sold the old shop years ago because our goal was to eventually put everything in our facility here. So that's a proposal. The board's talked about entrance signs for many years. Now that CDOT's cooperating in 10 grant, I think we could actually get a few done. Not all of them, but some of them. Maybe at the curve at Rogers Farm Circle, that would be a nice place. 66 coming in. Up the cemetery. So I'm preparing 5. 2 on 85, 1 on 66, coming in on 32 on cemetery, coming in at 32.5 from West Farm. So all 5 entrances in Platteville, not with 25 coming in from the north. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And they want to be all the same size. There has to be some variation based upon location, because some of that right away, especially in CDOT, is a little tricky.
Are you gonna get fancy with that, or just?
I like the stone appeal, and Jim that worked at the memorial, he's got all the stone digged out, ready to be engraved, and he could, make it kind of look rustic and nice looking. I have pictures I need to show you yet.
I'd like to see something with our identity. We talked about that. What is the identity of our town with the that committee that we did last year with the downtown development.
I like the stone look. It just looks nice.
To add to that stone something that maybe a railroad, a farming community, whatever, to add to that. Something.
Yeah. I personally don't like the Dr. Seuss appeal of Greeley. That's what I call it. That's just me personally. I don't like the bright green and purple trees, and it's not my thing. So, but we go back to that streetscape plan, and they did the poster boards, and we had people choose. They picked the kind of old western, rusty street lights and everything. That's pretty much it. I have those in the closet. So.
Up spots for Rotary and Lions and whatever churches want to.
Yeah, at the bottom we could identify our churches and our civic groups.
I
Put
get asked that a lot by those clubs still.
Yeah.
So they're still wanting.
And years ago we talked about the metal signs that some of these places have. I know Brighton has one, Milliken has one, and at the bottom they put the churches or the civic groups. Those are fine, but I kind of like the stone better.
Yeah,
honestly.
I agree.
So, And
Well,
then
our Egyptian brothers proved that that stone doesn't need much maintenance.
Exactly. This last one about town hall, I mentioned last year, didn't gain much traction, but I really, if we do the expansion of public works, we put a fence off that detention pond, that's the privacy fence we're talking about. Not the whole yard, but just to enclose that with the new expansion is, you step outside the town hall, I mean, we just had a great power wash, you can clean it all off. The stuff was starting to just chip away and come apart, I know it can be patched. And then just put a new coat of paint on. I threw 20,000 in here. I don't know what it's going to cost. I don't think it's going to cost 20,000, but this could be more of a maintenance issue. But it hasn't been painted as long as I remember. It's been built 1996. I've been here since '04. I know it hasn't been touched.
Wow.
I mean, it's a visual for the community. Police station, pushing that off. I put in the design. That's my goal with that is if the funds are available and things work well with DOLA and we get severance money, maybe the year after next, 2022, we put some money in to actually design it. And then in 2023, go after a grant.
Do you have a rough sketch of which one already?
Yep, it's all around.
That's one of the full basement, right?
Full basement for storm shelter and storage.
Evidence room.
Yep.
Carl, I know, that's on his wish list. That could be in the
Armory
basement.
down there, safe vault with all the weapons in.
It depends on how we use the basement. We'd have to have like an elevator or some kind of stairs because of ADA, but most of the use would be on the main level. The basement would be more like cold storage for records and then a storm shelter for community.
Is an ADA only for public accessibility?
It is, but I have to look at more of that detail. The basement should be fine. It looks like the one go down there.
No.
I was gonna say, I don't know, even though the public would be allowed down there as a storm shelter, I don't know if it has to be ADA accessible in an emergency situation.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just getting them back up after they go down the slide.
Environment full.
Well, I've seen places like my church back home, instead of elevator, they have the stairs on one side, used to be stairs on both sides going up to the chapel. The other side, they took the stairs out, just one of those cheap and expensive lift gates. It just goes up and down, it's outside is exposed. You put that inside, but anyway, it's a future conversation. Backhoe, we have budgeted in this budget, $130,000. Just from over the years, we talk about street sweeper, or utility vehicle, and air compressor. This year we budgeted $15,000 in the streets fund to replace the sander, which I told David, go ahead and order, because we plan on spending that money. It's in the budget, I showed it spin out. We need to replace our big sander for the winter time, because it's all rusted up. So, next year, if we bought any small capital item, I don't want to do a street sweeper or utility vehicle. I think an air compressor is practical. If David, you would just kind of want to briefly summarize what we've experienced the last week with blowing out all the parks, it's kind of why I lean for the air compressor.
Is this like an air compressor on a trailer?
Yes.
Axle and all that, yeah.
It's like a 150 or whatever.
It's somewhere between a 130 and a 185 is what we need. Used ones are anywhere. I had found a 130 this spring for $9,500. It was actually in pretty good shape. And literally, it was the same week that all the COVID stuff hit that I had just gone out and looked at it, and Troy's like, let's just hold off because we're not sure. So I contacted him yesterday just out of giggles and grins to see if it was still available. He's like, yeah, no, we sold it. So anyway, but we borrowed, for the last couple of years, we have borrowed compressors from Hudson or LaSalle or Meade. For the last couple of years, we've used Hudson's. Well, they said, oh yeah, you can come get it. Well, then our guys couldn't get it to give us more than 50 pounds of pressure. And they called Hudson, oh yeah, we forgot, we were having an issue with something with that, you know. So we've used it on a couple of smaller systems, been able to use it, but I mean, they spent all day here at Town Hall trying to blow this out, and this is normally a 3 to 4 hour project versus an 8 hour project, but they did get it done. And then we went and borrowed LaSalle's, and theirs is working about 3/4, so we were able to get enough air to do the bigger parks and that kind of thing out of it. But it's just, And the kicker is, unless you reserve an air compressor at a rental house in July for October, you don't get one. I saw a guy in Loveland the other day that had one from a rental place in Pueblo West, that he was blowing out sprinklers in Loveland, because that was obviously where he could get one. Wow. So they're just, and there would be several times a year that we could use it. We make do without one. We use an electric. We'll go rent an electric jackhammer, or other times a year if we need to get through frost or something else, we'll go rent one or big borrow or steal one from somebody else, and that's what we've made do, and we've figured it out. But at this point, trying to do some of this on a more consistent basis and have one that actually runs like it should. We borrowed Meads years ago and then blew out the cemetery with it, and then they called me and said it didn't work anymore. I mean, they found water in the engine. It's like, how did that, or in the compressor, it's like, how did the water get into the, I don't know whether we had so much head coming back down the hill from the cemetery or what. So that's, I was having that conversation with Troy, and I've been watching Craigslist to see if I can find a good deal on one. And
well, I think being Public Works, we should have one, not for a once-a-year project, but I know, I mentioned this before, we were in the high school for my dad, Public Works director, and we used it, we chip seal our own streets, so I use air compressor and I blow the whole street off. We had a jackhammer component to it, so we jackhammer out holes for water leaks and different projects, so it's a multi-use piece of item that you can get in the future. So, not this year, up to the year, but
I wouldn't buy used, please. You're just buying someone's problem.
Well, we looked at like Dixie auctions, and that's junk.
No,
so I think we can get by 2021, but going into 22, I like to buy just a brand new one and budget that.
well, if that's the case, we're going to need more money than 15. But
Well, the focus in 21 is tobacco.
right.
So in 2022, let's go after air compressor.
Unless I can get an air compressor attachment to the back.
With
I'm joking.
reference to, we were talking about chip seal and stuff, I mean, we have contractors that do that now. But if you have to tear out asphalt, we have to propose a new backhoe. That would eliminate having to have a jackhammer per se, anything like that, using that. So I guess what I'm seeing is you mainly just need it for once a year for blowing out the sprinklers. Is primarily what you use it for, or how much more would you use it for during the year?
When we have wintertime water line issues, we have used the backhoe and been able to force our way through, but it's pretty hard on the backhoe. You put some rock teeth on it trying to get through the frost, and you end up pounding with the backhoe. That's not good for the backhoe. It's not good for, so if we had one where we could throw a jackhammer on the end of it, we would use it more than just once a year. And there would be times where we could go in and do some additional cleanup on some of the streets and stuff like that if we had it. Other times a year, getting ready for cleanup, or not for cleanup days, for Harvest Daze, different things like that where we could do some additional things with it. We just haven't had one, so we haven't rented or gone to, I mean, there have been times in the wintertime where I have gone and rented one because we had enough frost that we didn't want to tear the backhoe up and beat it to death trying to get through the frost for a water line repair or something like that.
What does that cost for a rental for a day for those?
150, $200 per day. I think.
Can't get it when you need it.
But and so then, if we've got a water leak that has showed up, we're moving out on site. Then we realize we've gotten into frost. Then we're spending a couple, 3 hours finding somebody that's got one that's available. You're going to get it. Then, so it's not just it's not only the cost of having it. Yes, there will be a cost associated not only with purchasing one, but with maintaining it. But I agree with Adrian, if we can find a fairly new one, that used one that I had found this summer, or this spring, only had like 420 hours or something like that on it, and it was in very, very good condition. And so if we could find another deal like that, that would be an ideal world. But I agree, a lot of times you're buying somebody else's headache because they're used and abused and put so.
Yeah, I was just talking about expenses and upkeep of the compressor, have you guys looked at putting hydraulics on the backhoe? Using hydraulic machines or like jackhammers?
Well, that would actually be an option, potentially. I mean, we're going to have a hydraulic, part of what we spec'd on that hoe, or asked for pricing on, was a hydraulic thumb. So there is quick connect hydraulic there. We also are looking at a hydraulic compactor so that we can, you know, tighten up a ditch or tighten up a grave or any of those things with the hydraulic compactor. It's also going to be a quick connect. We're also going to have the quick connect hydraulics to the front end of it as well, so that it could be swapped out to a grapple type bucket on the front if we decided to buy one of those in the future. So and I don't know what it would take to plug on to that. I know you can buy a jackhammer.
Well, we have hydraulics that we run off our backhoes.
Okay.
Then you just plug in your hydraulic lines to that and plug that up to your hydraulic equipment, hand equipment.
Okay.
That they plumb into your system. So I don't know if that would eliminate, and I don't know how much that's going to increase the backhoe price too. So just looking at cost comparison of
right.
maintaining another unit,
right.
jacking that around, and you know, winterizing and storing it, and possibly, you know, having repairs and stuff on that versus renting it if it's, you know, like I said, blowing out the sprinklers or occasionally during the winter, or sometime needing it there for a special project, blowing out water lines. I don't know, with just having the backhoe, you can make those pretty universal piece of equipment you can use for hand tools and everything that you may want to use that air compressor for.
And I am certainly open to those ideas and suggestions. Hadn't even thought about that. I mean, I've seen that a time or two where somebody had some extra hydraulic lines that they were able to just quick connect in,
yeah.
and that's just leave your hose sitting right there and just run it off your front bucket or whatever, and have a 20-foot.
Yeah, it comes off like the right side there between your front and rear wheel, but that's something we use a lot there. Then you don't have to drag around another piece of equipment. You got it all right there.
Already right there. You just ramp up and put it in park. And
right.
Well, let's look into that. In this case, we just need a compressor for blowing out lines. We'll just keep running with it. Well,
Oh, what about buying it, I mean, for half the price or 3/4 of the price? Is it a nice big tank one that has enough pressure that you can put in the back of our public works truck and take out there and blow them out, and then when we're done with it, put it back?
For like doing my house sprinkler system, that would work great. But like at the cemetery where we've literally got a 4-inch main line that does 1,400 feet, I don't think I don't think I could buy a tank. I mean, the 185 that we're using right now is producing 185 cubic feet per second. That's where the number comes from on the side of it. So it's creating 185 cubic feet per second up to 100 psi. So we can fill that 1,400 foot of 4-inch pipe and push all that water out of there. And we've got 2.5 and 3-inch lines at Lincoln and Riverview, and I think they're 1.5 or 2-inch lines at Coronado, and then the ball fields has got another 4-inch line that runs from the well all the way to the east side of the community center. So I understand what you're saying. I just don't think we could get a big enough tank to create that kind of pressure.
So I can't wait to rehash all this with you guys in a year, but maybe we can talk about the stuff that we're trying to focus on.
yeah, let's go back to 21.
Good.
Water systems is a question mark. These two items here, so it's a water pressure line improvement 12-inch line from the tanks, or the same thing with the booster station. Steve with theirs provided some cost estimates, and this is to help not pressurize, but to increase the volume of the flow into the town. We just don't have the money for this. So this is something that we have to keep on the radar. It really needs to be done at some point. But this will probably be since we're going into a wastewater long-term bond obligation, I don't want to do another one to do a large capital project for the waterfront. So this is something we may have to start putting money aside for in reserves to go after this project. So I just want to keep it on the radar. Wastewater, y'all will know, we're doing the D&E, the design and engineering. 30% will be done by the end of this year. I budgeted for the remaining 70%, which is estimated at $430,000. We have a NOAA grant. And those are just estimates based upon what it'll be, about 125 next year and 75 this year. So they're not exact, they're just estimates. And then the next step, obviously, is to build the darn thing and pay for it. So right now, I was talking to Dave Green earlier today, and that this one-page fund sheet you'll see at the bottom is that once we have beginning fund balance, total revenues, minus total expenditures, we're looking at ending fund balance of about 3.9 million. That's fair enough to say, Dave, unrestricted for the most part. Yep. And then part of that, below at the bottom, part of that 3.9 is those earmarked funds and call trusts. The police station, the public workshop, downtown revitalization, those are the big ones.
Did we find out what Tabor requirements were?
62,633.
So we put that on this spreadsheet there. It's the very top of that list at the bottom. It's Tabor reserve.
It's the second one in yellow.
Oh, right there, I got it.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
So that's the Tabor, and so if the board approved everything on this sheet, you're looking at $820,000. So that would reduce our fund balance to still over $3 million. So if you don't mind, hold that thought, because then I want to go right to the general fund, because this all ties in together, the capital improvement fund. So the capital improvement fund, and let's just start this, which is on the screen, it's in your budget. On the revenue side of things, increase the sales tax by $100,000. This is a third of our 3%, the other 2% goes to the general fund. This grant revenue, that's a pass-through. That's the CDOT grant I just talked about. That's the exact amount. 248,226 is what our grant contract will be when it comes to the board. Use tax, I'm not looking at a lot of building this next year. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I want to be conservative. I mean, the 7-Eleven's been a blessing, but most of our building permits come, if it's not industrial park stuff, it's from residential. This is garages and sheds and add-ons to homes, so there's not a whole lot. Sidewalk maintenance, that's your monthly utility bill payment, or part of that. It's been averaging about $75,000. This projection is not correct. When we talked about water sewer last night, we're like 4 months behind, not 3, because of the way it's built out. And then enterprise fund, like public facilities for 2096, that is if one new home gets built. That's all I've ever budgeted. I don't anticipate much revenue coming in. Storm drainage fee, 1601, that's one home being built. Same thing with transportation, same thing with parks. So it's about 800,000 revenues what I'm anticipating, conservatively. Expenditures, this is where I'm pretty much dipping into our reserves and capital improvement fund. If you recall this last year, all these funds, capital improvement, use tax, transportation, they were all separate funds in the budget. We put them under the umbrella of the capital improvement fund. We still track them individually in that fund. The nice thing about it is if we budget 400 in the capital improvement section, and we spend 600,000, but we underspend in sidewalks and other parts of it, we're still in that budget. We don't have to amend. It's kind of like the general fund with police and public work. That's what I love about it. Plus, it's easier for Dave to track, and the auditors love it too. They're less fun.
I think it's easier for everybody.
Use tax, the only thing I'm putting in there is the mowing contract. That's part of the mowing contract. Well, that's primarily for parks. So I put 625 up here for rentals. Remember, it's an $850,000 project. 100,000 out of sidewalk fund, because that's about what that portion of the 850 is for, is a sidewalk along rentals with curb and gutter. And then the remaining 125 to make the 850 whole out of the transportation fund. So when I looked at the budget, there's around 140,000 in the transportation fund total. Or sorry, 1,145,000. The 1 million is restricted because that's what CDOT gave us for South Front Street. We can't use that. We do, we'll get in trouble. So I just basically want to use up, if you will, what's that for transportation fund? Because that's really supposed to go toward a new project. You're not supposed to use that for maintenance repairs. So we're building a new road. And that's it for the capital improvement fund. You have a CDOT grant that's paid for, $30,000 for mowing contract, and now the transportation fund, the sidewalk fund, and the original capital improvement fund, $850,000 to complete Reynolds Avenue. And that's my proposal. You scroll down your paper copy of the budget, you'll see Dave put in beginning fund balances and then ending fund balances. So in 2021, you'll see where those bottom lines are as far as reserves for those different things. Capital improvement will pretty much be, we're using a lot of reserves to finish this project. Use tax is pretty low, park impact's low, storm drainage, park and storm drainage will never be high until we have growth, new growth. Same with transportation. I don't know where that 1 million is, Dave, on that. I know that's in there somewhere, we're not using it. So I look at the October financials in the sheet.
Yeah.
It shows 1,140,000.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that needs to be.
I'm looking at this right now and I can tell there's probably a formula issue.
Okay.
Because there's no way it should go from 1,096,000 down to
That's what
120.
Yeah, that's what I noticed.
So I was sitting there trying to calculate it in my head, but I'll just have to go through and rebuild that formula.
Okay. Public facilities, enterprise fund, sidewalk maintenance. Sidewalk maintenance fund is actually doing pretty good. Even if we spend 100,000 next year, there'll still be about 82,000 plus revenue from the next year. So you're talking about Main Street in a couple of years, we won't be too bad off. But we also set money aside to call it for Main Street. Oversized, overweight. Dave and I were talking about this years ago. We established this because we wanted to come up with a new revenue. And when a big oversized rig comes through, it's like $30 or some silly thing. It's the drilling rigs that are $1,000. And a couple years ago, we had a couple $1,000 revenue come in because we had drilling rigs to go through town. I'm not sure.
It's also 40 to 70 vehicles.
Yeah.
When the rig comes through, then they've got all the support vehicles that go with them. So we got $1,000 for 70-some vehicles that made trips.
So not really want to do anything this upcoming year, but in 2022, look at, do we really need the oversized overweight vehicle fund, or do we abolish it? Just still have the fee, put it in transportation. Why have a separate fund for it? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Is the overweight, is that where we were putting the bridge money? Okay.
I was just gonna ask that, where's the bridge money at?
It's in that 79,000. That's pretty much all bridge money remaining. That's what that is.
Is that the county bridge money? Don't they give us a yearly stipend for bridge?
No, so
That's different.
a few years back, we needed to rebuild a couple of bridges, and we told Anadarko they couldn't use the bridges because they were falling apart. Until we fixed them, we don't have the money to fix them, so Anadarko fixed them for us. And they said, you will have a fund to fix bridges. And that's what we did.
And we did, and it's good to have money set aside for bridge repair. I don't disagree at all. But I guarantee Anadarko didn't tell Occidental about, or little Platte River did.
Anadarko's not, he doesn't.
I guarantee they didn't. But if one of our bridges, or called bridges, or culverts that go over the ditches up here need to be replaced, that'd be nice to have some funds available to do that. 79,000, whatever, that's not anything. That won't touch it. You need several hundreds of thousands of dollars for bridge repair. So what we've been
We
doing.
did that, what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? We had our bridge out on 32.
Yeah, we spent 30-some thousand in maintenance out there a couple years ago.
And then don't we have to get it inspected every 5 years or something like that?
Every 2 years.
State pays for it every 2 years, and it was just done.
Yeah. So, and they're rated, they're inspected and rated, course 66 is CDOT, 32.5 is ours. Those are the bridges, but we also have, every time you cross water, it's a bridge.
Cool.
So there's the Farmers Independent Ditch outside Rogers Farm, 32.5, that's a bridge. We have 2 on 32, we have 2 on 30, the dirt road. Going up the hill.
For the English ditch.
For the
and
English
Platteville
ditch and the Platteville ditch. So those are our responsibilities. Yeah, so those get inspected every 2 years.
Yeah, the
County does?
The state does.
Okay. So, another conversation with, keep in mind, So right now, they're doing pretty good. I know I went through that pretty fast, but as far as the capital improvement fund, the whole goal is to build that division sidewalks paid for by CDOT as a path to but to complete Reynolds Avenue. That's pretty much what all the money's in there for. Yes, sir.
Last night there was some mention of, I don't know how it was put exactly, something to the effect of the advantage of using up some of the reserve funds. Could you elaborate on that, please?
I don't know if I said advantage.
Well, okay. There was some mention of using the funds. And
Tonight,
rationale for it.
Yep. And that's what I'm asking the board to do, if you're comfortable doing it. Going back to the overall spreadsheet, this $820,000, most of that will come out of that $1.8 million unrestricted fund balance. So what you'll do, if you approve this, like in the, go back up to, if we chip seal Bella Vista, both sides of Main Street. Right now, there's $100,000 in maintenance in the streets fund, M&O, maintenance and condition. Add that 160, so that'll make it 260 in that line item in your budget. Our current fund balance of revenues minus expenditures for this budget is $245,000. That gets lowered by $160,000. So you're dipping into that. And to keep going, that's going to be gone. You're going to basically become unbalanced in your budget. So we always want to start with balance for operations, right? Tonight's talk is, are you willing to go unbalanced to do larger projects? When you go unbalanced, that's where I asked Dave to help me out because he's our accountant. If you overspend, you budget that way, you overspend, but that's how you're drawing from all these reserve funds. That's the only way you can basically use it. Is that fair to say, Dave?
Yes.
So we can't put those reserve funds in as a revenue anywhere because they're already in our bank. So that's why I was mentioning last night, Larry, is I wanted to do Grand Avenue with the sidewalk. I would like to do the playground at the community center. I would like it because I'm tired of kids tearing stuff up, but it doesn't have to be. The biggest project is I really like to do the park workshop. And that would come out of our reserve funds. We budgeted out of the street, not streets, but buildings and grounds in the general fund. And so we would way over budget the buildings and grounds section of the general fund, knowing that we're pulling that money out of our reserve funds.
So I have this following question.
Okay.
You're talking about well, first of all, I don't have any objection to the priorities of this capital improvement section. So we wouldn't want it to be misconstrued.
Shoot me down, I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
I'm generally in agreement with prioritizing these projects for 2021. Just a math question I have.
Okay.
You're talking $820,000. And how does that number compare to the amount of reduced revenues for 2020 that we anticipated but didn't receive?
Yes, good question.
Okay. Let me go back.
And also the expenditures that we didn't expect.
Yeah, let's see, it didn't throw us over.
Well,
In 20,
all of that, but
in 2020, we budgeted for revenues $2.835 million. We're anticipating to receive 3.188.
So we're over.
We're over.
And we're under expenditures.
And in expenditures, we go down to the total of the general fund. Oops. We budgeted 2.958. We're projecting 2.437.
So there you go.
So, if I heard you right, that 160 that's up here that's in this 820, that was something you're pulling forward from not spending in 2020, right? Is that kind of what you're asking as well too?
Sure.
Is that really not only using reserve but kind of using 2020 extras too?
The 250.
Yeah.
Well,
See, that's,
somewhere in there, there's a net amount of money
Yeah.
that's being taken out of the reserves. It's reduced by what we pull forward from money that we didn't spend in 2020.
That's how I understood you to say it, yeah.
Or 2019, or 2018, or
see,
2017.
you're exactly right, because the number I looked at after the first night last week is in the budget. If it all holds true, we're looking at having 750,000 more in revenues than expenditures, and that got my wheels turning. It's like, well, we're not using the money this year. We had a better revenue year than anticipated. We cut some capital projects. So the justification to the community is we're basically reallocating these. Technically, it's coming out of fund balance, because that's where the money goes,
Right.
into 2021.
But it's really not depleting the surplus funds.
Reserves.
Or the reserves.
I mean, that's a
by-
fair
By
s-
that much.
It's not depleting it because it would have already been used this year instead of this year. We built that up
It was
to
a
carry it, with the
combination
intent
of,
of carrying it forward.
and that's from a combination of money that we didn't spend plus excess revenues over estimated revenues.
Yes. And I think what it really comes down to is it's a presentation thing, right? Because unfortunately, everything you're saying is absolutely true. It's just really a 12-month timing, but when you present it to the public, it all of a sudden looks like you're going negative on this stuff and you're overspending your revenues, when in reality, you pulled it forward from the prior year.
Right. You have to show more than 1 year. You have to show multiple years for the community to see.
Understood. But, so the net difference to, what do we call this, the reserves? Is that the proper?
Yeah, it's proper term.
So the net difference to the reserves is not anywhere near 820.
No.
It's
If you
more
looked at
like-
it on a 2-year period,
Right.
which is what you're talking about,
Right.
the net difference to the reserves would be like 660, somewhere in there.
So look on the screen, if you
So we're
will.
750,000, right?
Yeah, and then,
So-
I was looking at that specific
Oh.
160, but yeah.
and then if you take the 2 year average, at the end of 2019, we underspent by 863,000. That's why our fund balance got so big. That's why I mentioned the other night, we need to start using that fund balance to get capital projects done. Because at some point, we're gonna have $10–20 million in the bank,
Well,
and people are going, what are you doing?
part of it is we're earmarking it, right, for the police, for.
Which we
you
have.
know, Right, and what should we do? Because we don't want the public saying, hey, you have $4 million in the bank, why are you not fixing this town up? Well, we've got to earmark for police stations,
That's
so
why
things in
we
the
did
future.
that, yes.
But we also have to spend it too.
So it would also be fair to say that you're spending your reserves without spending your earmarked reserves. You're spending your general savings account without dipping in your special projects.
And it would behoove the board to point out that a lot of that surplus in the reserves was from a fiscally conservatively constructed budget and underestimating income.
Oh, without a doubt.
Well,
It's absolutely
because
true.
somebody's gonna ask.
Yeah. Right.
Hopefully, there's enough people out there who understand this.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've seen the budgeted the last 4 or 5 years is that the revenues have always been budgeted with bare bones, as we know we're gonna get this. Anything else that comes in is fantastic, and then the expenditures are forced to fit the bare bones revenues.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm not a gambler, you know that.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I think it speaks highly of the way in which the budget has been managed.
Well, by
all
Troy
this.
doing that, it gives you the luxury of having this discussion.
Options.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where there's other towns going right now that had just a little bit of a hiccup to COVID and their sky's falling.
There's a lot of towns cutting 25% because when I came here, I'm not dishing my predecessor, but I remember our first budget meeting.
That was my first budget meeting too. That was terrible. If you guys ever do that, I'm gone.
My first budget meeting back in 05, 04. I came in May of 04, that's what I meant.
Oh, sorry.
That sales tax was maybe 200,000, property tax was like 400,000. And it's almost like
like, well, we think we'll get 200,000, but let's see if we can get 250. That was a mentality.
Oh.
And when it came to expenditures, I remember my predecessor coming to me after my first full year saying, you have X amount left in your police budget. You need to spend it because you're not going to get it back next year if you don't. So that changed. That changed. We changed that completely. We think we'll get 200,000. We're going to budget for 180,000. And if you have money, these guys, David and Mary and Carl and Jen will tell you, that last quarter is like bare bones. Don't buy any cop cars. Don't buy any junk. No more.
It's Christmas in July or you're screwed. You just
And that's how we have a $4 million fund balance.
Is there any reason, like, if we spend on the sewer plant, that we can use some of this?
That 500,000 is all we can use because we have a 10% max. It could be a little bit more, 500,000, but the estimate's 5.5 million, and we only use up to 10% of non-enterprise funds, according to NOLA,
Per year.
per year,
Oh, because it's an enterprise fund.
to jeopardize that enterprise. That's why with this $1 million grant for NOLA we applied for, we're going after the 2 million of the 15 million. That's federal, Middle East, not state, because that will jeopardize our grant.
Gotcha.
And I asked that question a million times, like, I mean, we could pay out $4 million of this sewer bill pretty easily with just cash if we can.
What if we could do the solar aspect? Not incorporate the solar into the actual sewer plant design, but do it separately, and then could we do that out of this reserve, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, we want to set it up to have solar. I don't think it's smart to not do it.
Sure.
We'll just kick the can on it.
Sure.
So I think we should, build a sewer plant and have the solar plan.
That's a question I haven't asked, but I will.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That could be a separate capital project that's not enterprise fund related, basically what you're saying.
Right.
But it's going to offset the cost to the wastewater plant. I don't know how those rules are. I don't.
I know. I mean, it's probably a gray area, but it might be worth looking into.
I think that you,
That gets tricky there.
yeah, because you're really splitting hairs is what you're doing, right? Because ultimately you decide what fund something's spent on it anyway. As you're sitting here making these decisions, and I take, for example, was it spent out of the general fund for a sidewalk? Or did the sidewalk fund pick up the sidewalk, right? You guys make that determination based on what has money. So something like that, you really have to look at and decide, is it part of a sewer project? Or is it part of an energy conservation initiative you're trying to promote for the town and therefore a townwide general project, right?
I love the second, the latter.
Right,
Yeah.
and
I understand, and that's what I'm saying is how you phrase it, how you present it comes down to,
if we build it out of the general fund and we need to do something to maintain it in the future, it comes out of the general fund. We can't take it out of the enterprise fund.
well, you guys are really just throwing all the
Those
No.
are
It has to
curveballs.
stay in the same fund.
So can I throw another curveball in here right now, or a knuckleball or something else? What I would see, at least the way that I hear JVA currently designing this, Spencer, would be the current design is going to get us our new treatment facility, and it's going to decommission the existing facility. So then once the existing facility is decommissioned, then the town can choose, does that become a soccer field, does it become a fishing pond, does it become a solar array, what does it become? But we briefly mentioned the solar thing to JVA, and they didn't think that it, and I don't remember the reasoning, but they didn't think trying to tie it all together was in the town's best interest at the time. So, and then you just made another comment, Mr. Green, that I had not heard. You said you're allowed 10% per year?
Right. So
Okay.
one of the tricks I've seen in a building, this was actually in the building of a wastewater and a water treatment facility using grant funds. So one of the tricks they did was December. They split it so the 10% came in 1 year, and the next 10% came 2 months later in January or February, and they were able to manage their and maintain their enterprise status and keep the state of Colorado happy and all of that.
Okay.
So that's a different twist, so let's do this scenario.
Because we're gonna be building this
Before
thing.
December 31, we have 500,000 collar trucks, so we transfer that to the sewer account for obligation debt.
That's what I was just gonna bring up, is that.
And then
that might be something-
2021 did the same thing, so when we get the invoice in 2022, we got $1 million.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna bring up, is if you constructively managed your transfers, you might be able to do that where it doesn't violate the temp. From an accounting standpoint, that's really not an issue. We're talking Tabor. This is all Tabor.
Yeah.
Is what drives this. So you'd be able to manage your under 10% for that and get that into there, and then you can do it again, but you can't do it the same year you're getting the grant money.
No.
So you need to do it, you need to start now and be proactive.
Well,
And then the other thing you don't always look at, and it may not be a great idea, but if you're trying to get more money into the fund, you could give it a holiday from the administrative fee. I know that's a small amount, but if you're trying to get more, because that's essentially a way to give it $60,000, $70,000 by avoidance of cost, but it doesn't go under the Tabor stuff either.
yeah, you know, that's probably a conversation last time, go back to water and sewer, you know, and even cemetery, we talked about cemetery, how we have to be honest, you know, it costs for operation cemetery, so instead of reducing operations, which are bare bone, which involves salary, benefits, it's the same as water sewer. That when Rob Tellis did that financial analysis, they really focused on not just operations, but was it take manpower, quote unquote, to run it. So all those numbers had to be in there. They didn't talk about admin fees though.
Right.
So I don't know how that works as far as Tabor and enterprise fund. I'm just not familiar with
I
it.
mean, there's no requirement that says you have to have an administrative fee. There's nothing specific that says you have to allocate things in a certain manner. However, GAAP says you should have a solid basis for your allocations, a solid reason for your allocations. But when it comes down to Tabor's definitely going to need a legal interpretation when you get into that, because it starts getting far beyond the scope of accounting. We're dealing with the legal things. So you'd want to make sure that the attorneys gave the blessing to that before you went ahead and ran through it.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've seen that approach done, and their attorney signed off on it, but it is different. So I don't want to sit here and say do it, and then.
So you said we can't do the 10% the same year we get the grant?
Well, the grant counts to the 10%. So you can't transfer $500,000 into the sewer fund and get $1 million grant. So that's because that's 1.5, and I think the revenues are what, 700,000, 800,000. So you got.
Isn't the grant, I thought the grant wasn't subject to that because it's coming from the federal.
We get the
Okay,
grant.
but if there was a state component to it,
Yes.
is I guess what I'm getting at.
Okay.
And the way Chris LeMayer, regional director, told us that if we somehow get, the committee says you can only have state funding, we can only get that 10%, so that 500,000.
It'd actually be none.
So if we transfer for 500,000, we'll verify, out of Colorado Trust Reserve for Sewer Lagoon, into the Sewer Lagoon Sewer Fund before the end of this year. We get the grant next year, out of federal funds, we actually build up another 500,000 out of reserves to quote, donate again. There you go.
So your 10% is based on 883,000 of revenue.
Well, Chris LeMay said it's 10% of your total capital project that you're applying to achieve. That's what Chris told me though.
So that's where we really need to look in this.
Yeah.
So I always thought it was 10% of the revenues can't come from governmental sources. So 10% of the revenues is like 83,000.
Yeah, when Chris and I talked, we're talking about the grant 10%.
Yeah.
That match for the debt
So
obligation.
that's where it'd probably be better off to get an opinion on that.
Yeah.
A Tabor opinion on that sooner than later. Because if it is only 80,000, well, that certainly limits how you get to 500 over. And also, the other thing to think about too, and the question I would pose to Kendra would be, can you set up a loan that's forgiven over time as well to try to get around that annual basis?
Gotcha.
I mean, a loan between sewer and general fund, where it's like, okay, every year we forgive 80,000 or something like that.
So it'd only be 10% of the 80,000?
10% of 8.
800.
So it would be 80,000 would be the
Yeah.
number instead of 500.
Instead of 5.
That's
Yeah.
a significant difference.
So I've always interpreted 10% of revenues.
Yeah. So and I don't know what, it may be both.
Yeah.
Maybe
something-
annual revenues or 10% of the total capital project. Because when I talked to Chris Lemay about the Dole application, I specifically said, how does this jeopardize the 500,000 we set aside? And we did that because we're thinking it was a 5 million, so it's 10%.
Right.
He said, it won't jeopardize that 500,000 if you get the federal part of the severance tax money.
Yeah, I've never looked into federal versus state funds as well either. Because sometimes the state gives you federal funds.
Oh, yeah.
Like what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of times in the grants, you have to go through and parse out. Even if it's a loan from like Colorado Water Power, some there is federal funds too.
Several years ago, we built a new sidewalk along Good Richmond Division to the middle school, which is a grant program for CDOT. It was federal funding, so we had to jump through all these hoops and had them specially trained and flaggers and
Davis Bacon wages and all of that.
CDOT's almost always federal funds.
yeah.
Almost always.
Senior bus is federal funds.
Right. It was. I remember it. Yeah.
So going back to this, that was a good conversation there. We pulled the spreadsheet back up. So we were talking about, Larry was on point talking about how do we justify this if you decide. So basically, the last 2 years, you know, I looked at, quite honestly, I looked at this year's cash over expenditures. But then if you look at the last 2 years, I mean, we built up our reserve funds, our unrestricted fund balance by about $1.5 million just the last 2 years. Because just a few years ago, when Steve Nelson was mayor, we barely got to 1 million cash reserve. Now we're almost at 4 million.
I have another interesting question, I guess. A little bird whispered in my ear recently that the expense, the cost of the sewer plant may well exceed $5.5 million. And at some point in there, in order to pay for it, there's been a consideration or conversation about a bond issue to finance the project. Is that correct?
It will be bonded no matter what.
Okay.
But you mean to an election?
Well, that's what I'm coming to. Does that require a voter approval to issue a bond?
From my understanding, our meetings that we had with not just JVA but State Revolving Fund and those people with CDPG, and I can't remember the lady's name we talked to at CDPG.
I've got a card, but I can't remember.
So I'll have David verify that, but it's a non-election bond because it's a State Revolving Fund program and it's an enterprise fund. That was my understanding.
That's always been my understanding as well, and that's the reason enterprise status is so important, and that you don't lose that with putting in the other funds, is because it's the enterprise fund, it can issue the bonds because you're paying those out of future revenues, a revenue bond, right?
Yeah.
And so you're pledging future revenues from the enterprise fund to take that over.
And that's
Whereas
what
if you did a road bond, you're typically going to have a mill levy associated with it, and it's not an enterprise fund, so the road bond would go through an election.
And interconnected with all that was the rate study.
Yep.
That
Rate study was key.
determined how much the rates had to go up in order to pay for the financing of the bond.
Yeah.
To pay that repayment.
Right, and that's why that thing has to happen. That's why it's so key to have your rates at an appropriate level to support it, because you can't just go get money from other funds or property taxes to support it. It's ultimately, if you had to prop it up, you do what you had to do. But
I do like the idea of subsidizing the overall cost with the potentially $500,000 per year for 2 years.
And that's something I'll have to reach out, like David says, a Tabor question.
Right.
So I'll find
But
out.
the thing that I find particularly attractive to that is that's interest I don't have to pay money on $1 million for 30 years. I'm not borrowing. That's $1 million I'm not borrowing. Ergo, I'm not paying interest on $1 million for 30 years. I find paying interest to be abhorrent, but that's just a personal comment more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, right now, if it is truly $5.5 million, best case scenario, we can use our $500,000 in college trust, earmarked for it. We get the $1 million grant, so we've just lowered it to a $4 million debt obligation. That's my ultimate goal. We can knock it down to 3.5. Obviously, I'm all for it.
Sure.
We have reserve funds. If we have another good year, we'll definitely have reserve funds for that. I just don't know that definitive answer yet.
And realistically, the cost is going to be similar, about 6.2. It's all said and done.
Possibly.
I mean,
He says probably, I say maybe.
What's going on bid at 4.9?
It's not going to be 5.5. Not at $1,100 a yard for placed concrete.
Well, and what they have done is we have already built in some things that are going to go away as soon as we get our CMAR. We built, I mean, they bid it, our ultimate buildings would be block buildings, you know, concrete block buildings, and more than likely those will go away and become metal insulated buildings that are, you know, have a brick facade on the front of them or a rock facade or something, you know, that kind of thing. So we're going to cut some costs there. They have bid having a covered digester, concrete covered digester, so we've got a spot to do our solids, our thickening later when we go into a solids handling situation. But the walls will be built in such a way that they can hold that concrete structure or the roof, but that may end up going away. But yes, to get everything that we've got on the wish list right now, Larry, it would come in at 6.2 on the guesstimate that they're getting right now.
Right. Well, one thing with that is, I think with that is engineer design is we don't cut back too much that we're going to have to, in 5 or 10 years, add something to it, when I think we need to make sure when we design it and we build it so we don't have to go and do that and spend $2 million to add this to it, because we should.
That would have been 500,000 this
right.
year. Yeah.
So,
Well, part of that cost, and this goes back a couple of years when we did our utility study update back in 2018, and I made comment then that this is going to be a very visible system. I mean, it's going to be eventually surrounded by residential on all sides. So I want it to be as nice looking as possible. It's just going to be high.
right.
And that's where the nice stone brick and everything comes from. We had to go back to metal building with stone facade and cut that price 30–40%, and it still looks nice. That's great. So, yeah, I hear the 6.2. I'm not going to believe that quite yet. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, you know, but that's where I'm going with that.
The optimist, and you know what a pessimist is. A pessimist is an optimist with experience.
Well, Dave and I had that meeting last week with JVA in this room, and we had it on the screen, and
Simon didn't want to throw that number out
Simon
there.
was saying, yeah, it could go up to 6.9, and I said, not the answer. Nope. No, I said, you figure out how to get back to 5.5, because that's where our feeders are rated at. I don't know what it's going to take.
But, yeah, I just want to make sure that
And I agree with what you're saying there, and that's, like I said, they've built in a few things that would be really nice to have, but we don't have to have, and then there's a few have-to-haves that are non-negotiables. We've just got to stay there and figure out how to
in
do
the
it.
construction business, we may be expensive, but we sure are slow.
Well, the biggest part of that cost, in my understanding with JV, is the concrete prices changed in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
That's why I said, you get a whole United Rate Index and some of these local concrete places, and let's get a realistic number.
And I, you know, being out and about, the concrete business is I don't know what's going on, but they are busy. Their trucks are running all the time.
They are swamped.
Yeah,
They're all over the place.
yeah.
So,
So looking over the capital projects, the improvements, so basically what Mr. Blum was asking about earlier, what we've done, what we were gonna do versus what we're trying to do next year. Yeah, we've done a really good job of checking things off, so kudos to you. Really the only two things that we aren't checking off of your list for this year, or we didn't do last year, is the air compressor, which I think we've already talked about that enough.
yeah, it's a dead horse.
And then the playground.
Yep.
I do want to go back to that for a second. The Parks, Trails, and Trees Committee did solicit for donations. We did receive commitment for 40,000 donations. I don't know how many of those would still come to fruition, but some of them were actual cash donations. So there is some money somewhere, I hope, that is allocated for
Think you
that.
can reallocate that, or get that reallocated, committed?
Right. You know, well, like PDC Energy gave us a check for $10,000, right? So we have that sitting there. Hope you know. I don't know. It's a lot of money. $150,000, right? Like, but this has been an extremely tough year for kids. So I think it would be a good thing to do personally if we have the money to do it. But
And that's just the playground part, that's not, you're not talking the splash pad thing
No.
that the grant was shooting for.
right, the grant was for the total budget for the splash pad, the restroom, and the playground was right around $350,000.
And I don't disagree, but I want to be devil's advocate. just a minute.
Please.
The kids the little types, absolutely. The bigger kids that I've seen in the last couple of years will go to the skate park, will go to the ball field. And if we have a full schedule of games next summer, the most used items over there will likely be what we built over there, not Lincoln Park. I don't disagree, Lincoln Park's old, Mike Elber helped build it back when he was the mayor. I mean, not that he's old, but the facility's old. I've seen the pictures.
I'm telling him, yeah.
Well, like David said, the biggest thing is that one slide really is the biggest thing we have to repair. Technically, we could take the slide off. Not that I want to. It's going to be about 10 grand, 15 grand if we can find a new slide for it. But the rest of it's just wore. Like the pictures you sent, it's just wore out. And my question is, not to get into this debate tonight, is do we need a huge monstrosity playground, or is a smaller one with other play components around it more practical? Remember, we used to have the little elephant thing that kids love that to death. When I built that park at Riverview Park, I didn't want a playground down there. I wanted a little slip and slide, and that trolley thing, and some swings. That trolley thing is crazy.
That can hold 6 kids at a time. I've seen them on
I didn't
there.
even count on it until I talked to Ken Cosper that built the playground. He goes, that's his #1 seller, because kids love that. They just want to
They like to
stand.
get dizzy and
So
keep their
when we
teeth
think
tires.
of like the community centers, those are the kind of things I'm thinking of, not a bunch of money, but a quarantined off safe area by that shelter down there. So let's revisit that in the future about what, you know, I still have that picture you gave me, of the, you know, replacing it basically the same size as it is. Does it have to be that way? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's on the list over there.
Pretty much, yeah.
And if
We've
I
been pretty
may,
dumb last
Especially
few
in
years.
a few years, so maybe we'll get to-
Yeah.
And nobody loves, they will tell you nobody loves playgrounds more than I do. Okay?
I don't know, man. I'm not so sure that's true, but
the other thing is, I think CERS is gonna end up pushing us, so that's the other consideration that we need to take into mind, is we had the CERS walkthrough on it, where we go to all the playgrounds and that kind of thing in September. And that's where the push to potentially get rid of the one slide and either go to like a fireman's pole or just close off that slide entrance right there, because the slide, the screws are starting to break through, the sun has deteriorated the slide enough that the screws are starting to break through, and it could create it's smooth enough right now that we're okay, but it could create a catch or a cut hazard for a kid that's sliding down and then cut their leg or something like that on it. So his thought was, financially, he knew it was super expensive. I didn't realize it was $150. I didn't remember that. I knew it was pricey, I just didn't remember how much. But he was saying he thought, you know, probably another year or two before we're going to get to the point that it's deteriorated enough that CSRS is going to say you really need to get rid of this. So I think that, you know, the question becomes, do we do something similar in the bigger scope, or do we just remove that and then put some smaller features like Troy's talking about there, and maybe at the, and I don't know. And
Well,
I mean, the board, like David Green said just a few minutes ago, there's a lot of boards that don't have the luxury of even having this conversation right now because of the way that things have been handled. And
Well, we got the money reserved, and if it's $150,000, we can add $150,000 and just get it done. I know we were, all the excitement we had in the community last year when we were applying for that grant, there was a lot of people about it, and I think we got, you know, we still have 3 point, you know, whatever it is, in reserve, so $150,000 in that isn't gonna take a bite out of it to get the playground done.
That's how I see it too, but I don't wanna force, I'm not gonna die on this sword.
What?
You guys are going to go down with me.
I think the public was really excited about the splash pad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think if they see that we at least do the playground, that's still showing that we're still looking out for something for the kids to do. And
Compromise idea. Could we downsize existing playground and then leave future expansion for a bigger splash pad when that time comes?
Or like you said, do a lot of like littler things, you know, like
A
the
smaller
I think we
playground
should
component,
budget it
and then,
do that, yeah.
and then you know, maybe like the swings, and the spinning thing like we did at Riverview Park around it, and just downsize the footprint. And then on the north side, and money or go out, you could add that splash pad component that everybody was excited about.
Yeah, I think
The
so.
budget's 150 and we have, let's say we have 20,000 in donations. We know we have 10, right? And we had 40 committed, so I'm saying, I'm thinking we get 10 more.
So can
So
we,
right now, we're talking about $175,000 if we compromise with a budget of $125,000 to $150,000. And then donations, we could make it bigger, or we can scale that 125 down. First, I think, is everybody okay with this, what Troy has outlined in red? Everybody's good with that?
with the capital improvement stuff? Yeah, I totally agree.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then with the park, if we compromise and ask Troy to add 125 to 150 for Lincoln Park for a playground, that's what's in question now.
Yes. I would say let's do that.
125.
Well, that's the 125 to 150, and if we can get donations, we can get, you know,
Are we looking at replacing it as is, the same size, the same?
I think we talked to Platteville again, and there was a company, Miracle, out of Boulder, that had provided a different quote as well, and there was a lot of things that we liked about theirs, and they're a more local company.
at least it would give us money to shop around and
Right.
See what we
can get for that money.
Yeah, I think so.
what company is King Casper with?
Ken Cosper, he's out of Fort Collins. He does a ton of parks and schools in the northern Colorado region.
Okay, so, but if
Well, we
Troy,
can get some of that.
I don't think we should build something like we have there already. It's been there for 20 years. I think we should do something that's,
with
and
more
it
modern,
stands the test
more
of
modern
time.
type stuff.
Right, something that's gonna be cool in 20 years from now, right? You know what I mean?
Not a 40-year-old playground.
Right.
Exactly. The spaceship and the old tractor tires.
Okay, so I penciled in 150. So I will add that to what I call the red list. So looking up on the screen, that we're currently at 245 in the black. So I will send out in the packet Friday an updated budget draft, and that will basically go to about 650,000 in the red, if not 800,000 red, just as a heads up. And that's what we have to show the community, that we start off very balanced, but look at our reserve fund, like Dave said. And the last 2 years, we had over 1.5 million in build up of reserves. So that's how we're going to have to explain it to the community. And that's how I'm going to have to write my budget
Put that in
letter.
the budget message and get that. Because the cool thing about the budget message is you get to throw in narrative and not just have somebody look at numbers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
you put money away in the good times for times when that aren't so good.
And hopefully it's still good times, but
Right,
When I don't,
but, you know, you still can obtain the goals, community goals of recreation, park or whatever.
That's
And
crazy.
pave rentals and all these other capital improvements that go on in what's not gonna be the best of years next year. But we're able to do that because of being fiscally responsible in the last 2 years.
last
5,
7,
last 12.
Yeah. I mean, you speak of controlling the narrative, there it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one thing that we need to explain to the community, that we were able to be conservative enough over the last 5 to 10 years that we would have kind of a budget and reserve in place that we could still do this in the times of the virus and stuff.
Well, that's
This is
one
when
of
you're gonna reap the benefit of the fiscal conservative policy.
Well, that's one of 2 things I anticipate as negatives from the community. Number one, how do you do this, dare do this during an ongoing pandemic? My justification is, you know, we're doing improvements for the community with available funds that have been built over the years, so it's time to give back to the community to kind of, you know,
We're experienced.
we don't, you know, when you're going on a pandemic, you don't be driving down, you know, a pothole street to a broken down park. I mean, sorry, that's kind of my philosophy.
Hopefully they'll outlive the.
And we're not
I
asking
don't
for.
think we'll have pushback.
No, but I did, you know, just to comment on that, I had a local citizen email me and I shared it with Adrian the other day about we shouldn't be wasting money on Harvest Daze and non-essential. We should only be focused on like water, sewer infrastructure. So those people in town will kick back on something like this. They're gonna kick back no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Well,
That's okay, I'm willing to fight the fight, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, we're the ones that will have the answer to it, to say, you know,
Well, There's gonna be some people that aren't gonna be happy with a free lunch, so.
One thing, before I wrap up, one thing we didn't do this year, as we've done in the past.
Wrong flavored chips.
They decided not to do it because Mike and Jeremiah wasn't here, but I want to bring this back to the board before final adoption on December 1. That's when we have the notice for December 1. I want to bring it back on that November 17th meeting as a final draft review. Number one, I want to see how the October financials or the November financials stem out for revenues and expenditures. Basically, this would be probably the most accurate estimated budget.
We'll have
we've ever had.
November, so I don't know, November 17th.
Well, we'll have the, this is September's and October's.
October's about November.
We'll have October's by November. I call them the November financials, October's.
I see, okay, that makes sense.
I see where you're going.
Got it. And then, I also, we did that 3-year kind of capital project plan. I want to revisit that and establish a new project list, because we need to, because we're checking off a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But Front Street, I want to stop ignoring Front Street and 32, and we have to get that done in a couple of years. And the water fund, the water tanks, we need to start putting money back aside for those water improvements for the town, because that's going to bite us in the rear if we don't. Plus, infrastructure replacement lines for the water, that's another big one. We can't ignore that because we have the other monster in the room with the wastewater. So those are the things I want to talk about.
Can we get a development to do that? Are they gonna split it with us?
I'd like to.
We can't provide you enough water, so you have to help us build this.
Metro
You
District.
have to pay.
Well, yeah.
So Spencer, the piece of property that's across from Bella Vista and south of 66, what was that called?
Jomax.
No, the piece that was platted for streets.
Platte
If you go
River
on
Farms.
Platte River Farms, you still go onto Google Earth, it still shows all those cul-de-sacs and everything else that were platted in there. But part of that development was they were gonna have to build a new lift station and then upsize the sewer line all the way from Division to the lagoon. Because by the time that was built, it wasn't gonna be able to, the existing line and lift station wasn't gonna be able to deal with all of that. And that's part of what sunk that ship, for lack of a better term.
Well, I was about to say before that Colorado had 4 cities in the top 10 on 100 cities to live in
Fort
this
Collins
year.
was first.
Yeah, Fort Collins, Denver, Boulder, and Colorado Springs.
Denver?
And they can't build it for Collins, so they build it in Fort.
And, you know, I haven't heard the projections that Will County is not gonna double by 2050 has gone away, so. I don't see how our financials are gonna get worse unless the economy, it's hard to say that, but we withstood a
We need
pandemic.
land.
We need some growth.
We,
Because of this, I've said a million times, if oil and gas tanks in Will County, that's gonna hurt us more than anything else than storefront. Not lower storefront, but revenue.
I think, several people have asked me, well, Platteville's growing, right? I said, well, not really compared to, you know, some of the other surrounding areas. I said, I think we're still poised for growth, but some of the other areas are either gonna have to start to peter out, run out, or start to be a little more cost prohibitive to make this more attractive. But in my mind, Troy and I have had conversations, 50 to 75 homes a year. This Firestone stuff where they're doing 300 to 700 homes, Windsor's doing 700 homes this year, you know, Severance is doing 350 or 400. I mean, the income would be fantastic, but I can't imagine trying to keep up with how do we staff enough police, staff enough public works, make sure we have enough plows and everything else to make sure we're taking care of that. But 50 to 75 homes, what that would do for our impact fees, I mean, you saw what it did when we, 4 years ago, when the rest of Rogers Farm went in. You know, that kind of, you know, that would be just right, because we could keep up with that. It's not going to drive us all crazy. It would help us have enough to start to do some of these other infrastructure projects that we need to do. So that's my personal opinion. I'm done.
Developer can't recover their costs on 50 homes.
Small developer.
Sorry.
I
I
understand.
think we would figure it out, however
How
many
would
it
they
was,
have to
we
do
would figure it out, I
infrastructure?
think,
Yeah.
personally.
Well, we find somebody like a Jim Plum who's willing to do small developments as he goes, that would be a key, but those are hard to find anymore.
Right.
You were just trying to solicit guys earlier this year, Troy, I know it didn't come to fruition, but did you feel like there was anything?
They're
Well,
so
why do they not want to build in
They're so
Platteville?
busy everywhere else, and we have things against them. Number one, we have the probably the highest water requirement around in our CBT, if not equal to their dedication requirements. And we're not wanting to do a 5 to 1,000 home subdivision like Barefoot Lakes, or what we try to do, or Firestone, or Fort Bluff. Fort Bluff is just finishing out pretty much County Creek, which is great. But
Why do you say that?
when I say
Why can we do one large subdivision?
we're sorry for it. That's the key, is everything we have in town limits is pretty much built out residentially. What we have is Platte River Farms, not practical. We have this ag holding property up here on 30, on the other side of the tracks. No infrastructure, no water, sewer. And those are the only 2 key areas for residential.
We're talking about that one north of 32.5.
Exactly, but we have to annex that in, but that's got a lot of restrictions to it. And then we have Gary Henderson's property. He's approached us. I have a map in my office. He owns both sides of 85 from 34 north to 36. The east side had large lot, railroad access, industrial lots. On the corner north of Energy Park, I think a 10 or 20 acre parcel for commercial, truck stop, grocery store, blah, blah. And then multifamily, single family, mixed use, residential, all the way to 36. It's a great concept plan. It would double the size of Platteville. That's what's happening to it. And I can't force them.
I'm still working
Find
on
some
it.
KB
I'm still
homes.
working on it.
Yeah, Adrian even talked to him too, it's
Like
like,
every 6
It
months.
just feels like our feet are stuck in the mud, or concrete on this, you know?
It does. I
We
mean,
need a
Well, when it gets
damn
too expensive to
jackhammer.
build and they run out of room in Timnath and Alt and Eden, they'll be looking
There's enough room up there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, you know, commute to Denver, we're, you know,
We're much
there's-
closer.
I'm getting feelers out from different people. It's pretty small scale, but not. I mean, they're so busy in all these other towns right now. I mean, we don't have anything just shovel ready for them. We just don't.
Yeah, they're taking the low hanging fruit now. And why wouldn't they? If I were in their shoes, I would too.
Yeah.
Why bother with?
We need to give them some low hanging fruit then.
You don't have to give to them, that's.
Well, we have a reserve fund, we could buy land and take the restrictions off of it so that it's ready for them to build on. I mean, you gotta think outside the box a little bit. if you want
well, that's where we need to get
break
that
this
economic
out.
development
You could get 10
bid
acres
going
there.
again and, our brochure and advertising.
You know, I look at all these other towns like,
Multi-use homes, I think.
Oh, yeah, I wanna put a bunch of staple together, ticky-tackies on 10 acres. No thanks.
I see some of these other towns grow on mead. They're not restricted geographically. They're I-25, but they don't care. We have UP 85 in the river. Those are some real serious restrictions we have to deal with.
We need to look at a metro district for east of 85. We need to.
If we ever, yeah, that's the only way that's gonna go.
Yes, it's the only way it's gonna go.
Could get water east of 85. In theory, right?
Oh, we can get water east.
Our water's east of 85.
Yeah.
We'll get the-
Right, we can serve water east of 85.
It's wastewater. Now, my idea of Platte River Farms that I talked to Ken Bachman, he's basically a CPA for the guy that owns it. He's just managing the property. I mentioned a large lot residential development on septic. I mean,
We could serve water to Platte River
we could serve
Farms.
water to it, we just can't really serve sewer, but why can't you do, of that 50 acres, do 25 2-acre parcels with a leach field and septic and let them build these? I mean, that's a market out there. Why not? You know, he's not a developer. But if I can find somebody, again, like Mary said, nobody wants to develop 25 houses. You know, it's not worth their money. So, I don't know, just.
There are some smaller, the custom home sort of subdivisions when you come in on the north side of Frederick Firestone there, you know, that.
Yeah.
If you get the right, you're on the river, you know, you got some things that you check off there, that's not a bad idea.
The one thing I want to stay away from, and don't take me the wrong way, please, but the one thing that we can pull in pretty quick is slapstick, small modular home facilities.
No.
And that's, I don't want to do that.
No.
No.
Even though there's a housing market for it.
We also don't want to deny affordable housing opportunities.
I know.
That's just, I'm not against what you're saying, but there has to be somewhere
This'll-
for people.
Isn't it affordable housing an oxymoron in some?
In Colorado.
It's not supposed to be.
Well, the new owner
Well,
of Nick
lots of
Christmas
things aren't
property.
supposed to be, but they are.
I bought that 11 acres, sat by the sewer lagoon in the dog park, just left the dog park. He bought that with plans in the future, next few years, hopefully, to do some duplexes in a couple of like 16-unit apartment buildings over there. Because he asked me about the sewer lagoons and his property limit boundary and pushing rentals through to Division or Sturgill. I don't know how serious he is about it, but those things we could easily pick up. And that's the housing demand. Duplexes and apartments and affordable housing. So, I've tried for years to get senior housing in here and I just can't. Nobody's interested. So, but that's all I have tonight. And we're just chit-chatting now, so. Thoughts, Adrian? Okay.
I have a phone number to a guy who's interested in senior housing, he just needs land. He's ready to build.
Well, years ago, the gentleman who used to own that big lot that Rick Fergie and Erica bought, he approached me with, he had a whole schematic. He was gonna build the smaller house on that property, was gonna be a caretaker with a nurse living there 24/7. And he was gonna knock the big house down and put in like a 18-unit nursing home, basically, which was a mix of, you know, assisted living versus nursing homes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we put everything in the recycling.
He went away. So the thought's been there, just,
You didn't know?
so.
It's been on the front yard.
Anything else for me?